is I put last week's information, if you can see on the side here, all the way to the bottom of the presentation. So if you ever go back into the presentation, there it is right there. It's still there. And that's what I'll do with this week's information as well. I'll just put it down to the bottom so that we all still can, access anything that we want to look at afterwards. Rules for tonight's Zoom, same as last week. When you first enter, please stay muted to avoid feedback. Zoom sessions experience some lagging, so cameras off can help. When all cameras are on, that lagging occurs. Tonight's discussion will be a collective group effort like last week's. We don't want to be grandstanding or trying to make a name for ourselves. Just, be here for one another. And I will do my best to include as many coaches as possible in tonight's discussion. And again, considering we only have, I think, 7 people total for participants, we should all be able to share out and not have any issues there. And then last, but not least, be professional at all times. Again, you can find all of tonight's information on longandtriple.com. It looks a little bit different now that I changed things up for this week's conversation. And again, we have the post-session survey. Again, I appreciated those that took it last week. And you'll be able to go in there and answer that. And what I did is I put 2 different topics in there. If we only get to the top one in terms of the differences between the long and triple approach, then just answer that question and submit. And then, of course, you'll be able to see the results right here as well. All right, so this is a topic that I really wanted to cover. And to be fully honest, this is one that I'm really glad, that Casey Walker-Daniels is here again with us, because there was something that happened with her in high school that made me really step back and take a really significant look at the long and triple approaches. And I can talk about those a little bit later after we've all been able to, share out a little bit. But first and foremost, I'd just like to ask, again, collective response like I did last week, is there a difference in the long and triple jump approach to you? Do you tell athletes to run differently? Do you have them utilize the same mark for both setups, long and triple? Is there a different intensity level? Do you use the same start technique, which I think a lot of us last week agreed that a crouch start, or a static start, I should say, was probably most beneficial for high school athletes. So is there anyone that wants to, either just write your answer in the chat, or we can go to volunteering and talking about this right away as well? It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Well, first, I had a couple of kids who were elite triple jumpers who were unable to long jump. I mentioned to you my best triple jumper, Nicole, just could not long jump. She ended up being a 42-foot triple jumper. But she could not make the grade as a long jumper.
Okay. And why do you think that was, Patrice?
She was a ballerina. Okay. That was her background. She was a dancer. And rhythm got in her way. She was also a 100-meter sprinter. And no matter how much we worked at it, she just could not conquer the long jump. Illinois is a very competitive state, and her best long jump ended up being, in high school, ended up being 16 feet. I think she had steering mechanism problems. We could not get her to slow down her approach. Um, and the best guess I can bring up is, do you remember a long jumper from LSU? A sprinter long jumper. She was the national champion in the 100. And this may be dating myself, but she was too fast and she could not control herself. And I think that this applies to Nicole. Whereas in the triple, she knew she had to control her phases. But in the long jump, she thought she had to just be bucket all out. So she just, I'm going to go after it. And that's what she did. So before she would just destroy herself in the long jump, we just pulled her out of it.
Why? I mean, with being a 42-foot tripler, of course, that's a almost a no-brainer, right?
Yeah. I mean, so we put her in the triple jump, the 4x1, and the 4x4. We couldn't put her in the 4x2 in Illinois because that's right where the triple jump would be. Illinois has that weird set of events. And the triple jump would happen right at the 4x2.
Okay.
So, it was just weird.
So what I'm hearing you say then, Patrice, is that in the long jump, she knew she had to be top speed, like top gear, going as fast as she could, and that messed with her. And when it came to triple jump, because she understood that there needed to be more control in the triple jump, which I agree with, she was able to slow down and control herself because she just knew the triple jump and what it asked of her better.
Yeah, she knew she had to perform ballet type motions. She knew she had to perform this dance. And oh my goodness, she performed this rhythmic motion. She was poetry in motion. If you ever saw her jump, she went on to perform in, at one time, she held the Big Ten record.
Oh, wow.
She ended up being an All-American. And she was powerful. She was strong. And oh boy, she ended up second at JO's, but she knew how to control it.
Gotcha.
So she understood her body, where she didn't understand her body in the long jump. Where my other long jumpers who didn't have as much speed, they were 12-0 sprinters, they understood their speed on the runway.
Can I ask how long had she been triple jumping when you tried to introduce long jump?
She didn't start triple jumping until she was a sophomore in high school.
Interesting. Okay. Chris Mertens asked on the chat there, he says he teaches the long and triple jump the same way, except the final two steps. Is there supposed to be a difference? And I'd love to open the floor to this again, to anyone that might want to say something in terms of, do you see the approaches being different, including those two steps like Coach Mertens asked, or what are your thoughts? Anyone else want to unmute themselves and give a thought on just kind of the general approaches between the two different events?
I don't know. What do you think? There's more speed in the long jump. Um, the the triple jump, my approach in the long jump, my long jumpers are more maybe 100 feet. My triple jumpers probably 90. Um, Probably,
Patrice, do you utilize a penultimate kind of flat-footed contact in triple jump?
yeah, oh yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. But we
Oh, I'm not hearing her. Patrice, you still there? Does anyone else want to share their thoughts? Do you use a penultimate?
focus
Oh,
we're not going to focus on that so much where it takes away from the jump. You know what I mean?
yep.
I've seen coaches focus on that so much that it takes away from the jump, but it's definite there.
Okay. Aaron Gadsden, I saw that you unmuted yourself. Did you want to share anything on that topic about the last two steps or penultimate takeoff?
Oh, I mean, I was going to speak more generally, but
Oh,
I
go
think
for it.
like,
Whatever you want to. Whatever you want to add.
yeah, the last two steps definitely have to be different. As far like if we're just talking like high school, I would say that generally speaking, the triple jump run's going to be shorter. Like I don't, it doesn't like have to be by design, but like I think triple jump technically is just a lot harder, and most kids in high school either don't have like the strength capacity or just like the coordination to hit a triple jump as hard as they might for a long jump. Because generally speaking, you always have these kids in high school that jump super high in their first phase and they crash and all that stuff. And adding speed to that just kind of makes it worse.
Agreed.
So personally, like I might have kids really only doing like an 8 or 10 step approach in a triple jump. Like I I don't think that you should do that for more advanced kids or like adults and stuff like that, because I think a 10 step triple, the rhythm was way different than a 16, 18, 20 step. But I think the first step for a high school kid is really just learning the technique of triple jump and doing it under control. And I don't know many high school kids that can do it under control from 14 or 16 steps, at least for a couple years.
Yeah, and I would agree. One thing is you mentioned the discussion there, and this is obviously very important, and we can go over this in later talks in more detail. But getting way too high in that first phase, Aaron, a lot of kids do that at the high school level. You are money on that, and that's why I think a lot of people might not think to do a penultimate in those
Mm-hmm.
last two steps because uh, kids don't understand how to run through the board, and if they put in that penultimate step, they're going to end up getting too high. So, anybody
Mm-hmm.
want to share thoughts? Like, is a penultimate in triple high school appropriate? Is it something that we should be utilizing, or should we first and foremost as high school coaches really be focusing on just pushing through the board at takeoff? And again, later on we can go in other discussions down the road. We can go more in detail on takeoffs, but I think this is an interesting thing to kind of just throw out there right now. Does anybody have an idea or opinion they want to share on that, whether we should be doing penultimate in triple in high school or not?
I think we have to, but sometimes I've heard coaches put too much emphasis on penultimate where they I have a friend who overemphasizes penultimate and the kid's hips drop too low. Do you know what I
Oh yeah.
okay. So instead of me using the words penultimate, I just tell the kids that I really want their heel to make contact with the ground. And we have a nice, easy drill that we do.
Okay. Anyone else want to share any thoughts on that in terms of penultimate in high school or not for triplers?
I definitely think it's a bad idea.
Okay, Aaron, thank you for that. And uh, you know, Casey and I will obviously share our thoughts in a moment. And she trained under me. I'd love to know if anything has changed from the collegiate level for her since you know, being on the team that I coach on in high school. But I appreciate that very much. So, Coach Mertens, for you know, for that perspective, you know, we'll talk about a little bit more of the actual approach, and I can also touch upon those last two steps when I get to mine, and Casey can as well. Aaron Martin, sorry to hear you don't want to triple jump in Iowa. I've heard that before. We've competed against schools from Iowa before in Platteville, Wisconsin,
Yeah.
and and having you know, them not being able to participate in the triple was always super weird for me. Super weird.
Yeah. So you guys do you guys have pole vault? Because we don't have pole vault either.
We do,
Like,
yes. Yep. There was a point in time where actually pole vault was a question mark in the state because of a lot of safety reasons. And at one point, they made the kids wear helmets, and then the helmets went away, and it was just like this giant mess. I'm just really glad they kept the event. So you don't have triple or pole vault?
No, we don't have neither. And I feel like we did way back when in Iowa. I'll have to look it up, but yeah, I don't think we've ever had triple jump.
That's crazy. Do you know if
Yes.
that's for safety reasons or?
You know what? I'm not even sure. We do have. I don't know if you guys have like the shuttle hurdle relay, and we also have like the 400 hurdles. So I don't know if, and I know some states have the 300 hurdles. So I don't know if that anything has anything to do with it. Maybe we have like a few extra events than you guys, or instead. So I don't know I don't know what states you guys are coming from or competing at.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're a 300-meter hurdle state, and we don't have shuttle competitions unless it's just a special situation, like a special kind of meet. I can think of only one meet in our entire time where we had shuttles, and we don't go to that meet anymore. It was in Monroe, Wisconsin. So that's something that we rarely see. So it's interesting how things are different by state.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's weird. Okay. It also was asked earlier, Casey, did you do both long and triple? You can share that in just a moment. Yep, looks like you want to say more in depth. Okay, perfect. So I feel like in general, we already kind of shared out. Is there anyone that wants to say anything before I open the floor to Casey and then follow up with my own thoughts? Anybody want to share anything? Just so you know, Patrice, I had to mute you because I was hearing some feedback on this end. So if you need me to unmute you, I can, or if you can, I think just touch your screen and see some options there. So anyone else have any questions or comments they want to give before we move to that next slide? Okay. So Casey, go ahead and share your thoughts on the slides here, what you see.
All right. Hey, guys. Yes, I have done long and triple jump. I started as a long jumper way at the beginning of my career. I was a long jumper in 8th grade. I think my PR was like 12.4, but it was one of the best on the team, and I was super proud of myself for that. When I started triple jumping, I sort of dropped out of long jump for, lack of time, I guess, during practices. And I was also transitioning from a short sprinter to a long sprinter, from 1 200 focus to 2 4. So I had a different coach with different practices and time demands than the short sprinters did. And then I came back to long jump a couple times. There were a few meets where later in my high school career where I did go back to long jump, but I was one of the kids that Coach Wilson was talking about. I am a somewhat decent triple jumper, about 38 feet right now, and I can't really get past, a 16-foot long jump. And I think the differences in the approaches, like on the runway, are subtle, but I think they're important. I've noticed that, after doing hundreds and hundreds of jumps in my life, going down the runway, 10 times a day, every day for 6 months a year, I've noticed that at the board, the biggest difference is long jump. You have to set yourself up to vector your momentum up. And that's why lots of triple jumpers, beginning triple jumpers in high school, they get too high in the first phase, because when you teach them the penultimate step, it teaches them that they have to set up their bodies and they have to load their legs and their momentum, and they have to get ready to do a big jump, which I think is possibly more damaging than helpful in triple jump, because I do think that you need to go through the board as opposed to long jump where you take off at the board. So height is obviously an advantage right off the board during long jump, but in triple, I believe that you should be going through it, so that, if you hit top speed, you have a little bit less control, less ability to do a penultimate, go up. And I think that really helps in the second and third phases, because you can keep that speed better, when you stay lower in the first phase. And I really think that you should be able to handle as long as you're able to handle the impact of landing on the first phase, jumping too high might not be as big a deal in triple jump, but definitely after having done triple jump for a couple years and then going back to long jump a couple times, it did not work well. I was conditioned to running through the board, going all out, and reaching forward instead of going up. And I think that's why you can't really do top speed in long jump, because you have to stop, you have to not necessarily put on the brakes, that would be bad, but you have to vector your momentum upwards and get as high as you can in the long jump. And after unteaching myself that in triple jump, it was really hard to go back to long jump, because my coaches watched me do run throughs at practices, and they always told me that I need to get higher, but I really couldn't after a couple of years of doing triple jump, and the muscle memory had pretty much ruined long jump for me. So I think it takes, even though it seems like long and triple jump are pretty similar events,
Nope.
I think it's pretty easy to try and teach them the same way, but I think that they are very different, and I think it's important to teach those differences, because it's not as often as you would think that you can find an athlete who can specialize in both of them. I think that you're either a long jumper or a triple jumper, and if you have the potential for both, I think you should focus on one of them, because they really are two different types of motion at the board. So I think that you should be able to teach those differences, teach both jumps differently and be able to acknowledge that. And yeah.
Great. One thing that stood out to me, Casey, when you were talking, that kind of brought me back actually to the discussion we were just having about the penultimate at takeoff and maybe getting too high is what you said about handling impact. So from what I understand, in all the studies I've done, is that there are, generally speaking, two different kinds of triple jumpers. There are the individuals that run through the board like you do and keep their speed, and those are known as speed triple jumpers. Then there are the individuals that get too high in that first phase, but because they can handle the impact so well, they can muscle through or power through the phases while still keeping not a significant amount of speed, but a fair amount of speed. It's the strength that they have that's actually pushing them through the phases, not as much the speed. So that is a strength triple jumper or a power triple jumper. So I just wanted to talk about that because there are some people out there that are just made to handle the impact better than others. And that's something that we definitely can train, but it's hard to find that kid. And you don't want to try to tell them to get super high in the first place, but that's a whole different can of worms. But I've seen kids get way too high in the air, like they're long jumping, and they finish the jump fine and go 43, 44 feet, guys, I'm thinking. And, you know, they didn't seem phased, where another kid goes through and handles or tries to handle that same impact, that same takeoff, and they get injured. So there definitely are different kinds of, I guess, jumpers and the way they handle impact there. So for me, and we'll talk again, guys. I want to open up the floor once more after this to see if there's any more thoughts you might have. What I teach is I teach long jump, top speed. Now, Patrice, when you were talking about an athlete, or your athlete, I should say, that was almost running too fast, I'd actually like to address that in just a moment here. Because I think there's a way that we can help athletes to start looking at the approach a little bit differently. So in long jump, all out, top speed, go, right? I mean, that's how I teach them, attack. In the triple jump, though, we talk about top controllable speed. And this is where I mentioned earlier how important it is to me that Casey's here in this conversation. When Casey was a freshman, she talked about this last week. Her first ever triple jump was just atrocious. It was, and her and I know this. We joke about it all the time. I call it the awkward giraffe jump because just things were just all over the place. It was nutty. And
I feel like they should see the video.
Yeah, I'll have to bring it up for next week. I'll put it in the presentation for next week. You guys, I don't know if you've ever seen anything like it. So, knowing that Casey was a very strong athlete, I had a lot of belief in her that she would eventually transition into a good triple jumper. And she's exceeded those expectations by like tenfold. But the belief was, I kept telling her, we just have to control your speed. So she comes back her sophomore year, and I say, okay, we've been working on this a lot more. You're super familiar, or not super, I should say, you're more familiar with the triple jump than you were before. So let's just add a little bit of speed from last year. And to this day, Casey pulled off the best second phase I've ever seen out of an athlete her sophomore year. And it was because she was going so slowly through the speed and controlling herself that she was able to literally get that knee and those toes up exactly where you want them in that second phase. It was picture perfect. So then the next year I said, okay, Casey, that jump from last year and how you performed the whole year was awesome. Now let's add some speed. So she added a little bit of speed again. And she, again, had a great junior year, jumped a little less junior year than she had because of other commitments on the track and other events that she was really stepping up in, which I was like nervous about because I really knew that she could develop into this amazing tripler and wanted her to triple, which she did more so in senior year. And then senior year was finally like, okay, you know the jump, we've added speed every single year. Let's just go flat out, like just attack that thing. Let's go. And that's when she started doing some really big, great things. Casey, did you want to say something?
Oh no, you're good.
Oh, okay. I thought you didn't. Okay. So then this is the idea that I've really struggled with over the years. This whole top controllable speed. Any book you read, it'll tell you that a triple jumper needs to be controlled. Well, duh. Like, right? We should know that, because if we tell a kid to go attack that board with little to no experience, they're going to get injured and maybe never jump again. So I really started thinking about, like, okay, I think I got lucky with Casey. Like, she understood my terminology of just adding a little bit more speed, and she was very like cerebral, or she just knew how to like make me telling her that actually happen. But there's so many kids out there that I don't think they understand what that truly means, just like adding a little bit more speed, or in your case, Patrice, taking off some speed. So something I started thinking about, and I talked about this year at the Wisconsin Track Coaches Association conference, is starting to teach, especially triple jumpers, a percentage of their speed. And I would love to hear, after I'm done talking about this and I, move on and so on, I would love to hear your thoughts. But my idea here is that if we find the top end speed of an athlete in, a certain distance, if we are able to then find a percentage of that top speed, we can literally have kids practicing to run down the runway at the speed that we want them to run at, letting them know if they hit their exact time, right? You find a time, you multiply that by the percentage you'd really want them to control their speed down the runway with, and then you have them do approaches with an automatic timer like free lap or a stopwatch. And you tell them, okay, that was a little too fast. You got to go a little bit slower. And after a while, the idea would be, and this would have to be a great deal of the early season training, the idea would be that they would eventually understand what that percentage felt like. And then you could find a mark for them, and then you just go. Is there anyone that has like any opinions on that? I mean, this was something that I was going to do a lot more this season, and I never got around to, obviously because of COVID-19. But the percentage ideas is something I think could really, I don't want to say revolutionize, but it could change the way that high school triple jumpers approach the board, because they'll know how to run at the board. And I'm not sure we've taught them that very well at the high school level. I don't think they fully understand what a controllable speed means, and we have to actually teach them that. Anybody want to share their thoughts?
Well, I think that works.
Okay.
Just from experience, I've done that. I don't have the money for a free lap.
Yep.
That's just one of those situations. I've been at high schools where we never had the money. At Hinsdale or at Oak Park. Well, at Oak Park, that was a long time ago, and free laps didn't exist. We rehearsed run-throughs 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay.
That was our staple. And that's how my long jumper won state at Oak Park. And one of the reasons she won, and I would take it to the bank, was that she understood her approach.
Mm-hmm.
Because we rehearsed it all the time. My triple jumper got 3rd in state for the same reason, because we rehearsed. And she knew, because I would put the watch on her. I would say, you're right. I would say, you're too fast, you're too slow. And I think I told you all, I have epilepsy, so I can't tell people 16 steps or 14 steps. I can't do that. I had to move them back just by tape measure distance because I have been there, done that. You know, I just know by having been around that they need to be at 90 feet or 85 feet or whatever. I don't know how I do it. I just do it.
Okay. But you
Yeah.
you see some merit in that percentages idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and
So
I really hope that next year I can get the testing underway for this and really see. And Patrice, you're right on the money. Free lap systems are not cheap. It
heck
is,
no.
yeah,
$3,000.
yeah. It is a tool that we were lucky to be able to afford 2 or 3 years ago now, and we're just now trying to like figure out how to get it in our program and use it properly. And so, yeah, I totally agree. There are some different apps and things out there that you can utilize that time, after you push the record button, it times them to a certain spot and you can stop it when they get there. And so I encourage you to maybe possibly look up any, apps in the App Store.
At Rockford East, I had to buy the mini hurdle.
Oh, dang. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you know anybody who wants to donate equipment to us, I'm open.
You'll gladly take those.
I'll take anything. The power hurdles that you set up for kids to learn how to hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
I had to buy a set of those.
My goodness.
Yeah, so I'm open, but so yeah, I would encourage you to time and do reps 2 to 3 times a week.
Yep.
Because that will give you a state champion, because your kid understands the weather and do it against the wind, with the wind, crosswind, whatever, because your child has to understand everything and talk them through everything about and quiz them. How did you feel? What did you feel? What did you see? Because they have to own their own experience about what is going on that runway. They have to give you the feedback about what is going on.
Okay.
You know what?
Yeah, no, I totally do. Totally do. Yep. And that's something that I've started doing a lot more in the last couple of years, of just asking them, like, what was the difference in that jump, and having them think about that. So it's a really good point as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's because I was a long jumper, and, that was what was taught to me, and that's what I try to teach to them. And it's worked. So
Okay.
it's what I swear by.
Good. So in the chat on the side here, Coach Mertens, you had asked, does a shorter approach just do a similar thing? Like, because we want them, you're asking if they have a shorter approach, right? Is it going to be a smaller area for them to get too wildly out of control for speed, and just in general have a better feel for the runway? Yes, it does probably work that similar thing, or that similar way. As you see here, I have the same mark for both, and this isn't always correct. They're always around the same. The reason that I have the same for high schoolers, instead of having a shorter one for triple versus a little bit of a longer one for long jump, is because a lot of times high schoolers, they let the competition get in their head. They let it affect them. They have question marks. They sometimes have issues from that mental perspective and struggle through certain things. So, like, for instance, if we go to a location that has a thinner takeoff board, then our facility does, a lot of kids think that changes something. And it doesn't, obviously, right? They still got to hit that same location. It doesn't matter if the board's an inch thick, you know what I mean? Like, or wide, whatever you want to call it. It's the same. So I keep the same mark for both, but what I really preach on my team is pretty short approaches in general. I mean, Casey last week, she talked about her approach, and even her senior year, she was only utilizing, I think, a 14, Casey.
I think I still graduated. I know I did 12 up through junior year. I might have done a 14 senior year, but I think I did 12.
Okay. And I mean, that's great. Like that's something that I feel a lot of people get really crazy about. So for instance, I read a book, I think I might have talked about this last week. I read a book that was from the 80s where a guy suggested that high schoolers should be having 120-foot approaches. And there's no way. I mean, there's literally no way in the world that should be happening, in my own personal opinion.
Wow.
When you shorten up those approaches, Coach Mertens, and I know Aaron, you said you kind of had the same question or thought. When you shorten up those approaches, it does a couple of things. It not only gives them less room to mess up in the lane, which is good, especially for those younger kids, but it also kind of does control how much speed totally that they can get in some cases, right? Some kids can get up to speed very quickly. Some kids need a little bit more time. So it's athlete to athlete. But for me, I just utilize the same mark so that they feel there's some kind of consistency there. Generally speaking, I don't have a whole lot of kids who both long and triple. I mean, we do have those kids, but a lot of times, and we're gifted with the ability to not spread them out as much because we've got 70 jumpers on our team every year. I don't like to have kids long and triple a whole lot, only because of the things we've been talking about, the different runway, the different things you need as an athlete, as a jumper, to be able to compete in both. Plus, these are the hardest events on your body, bar none, of any other event on the track. And having a kid go long jump 3 times and then maybe they make finals, so they go 3 more times and then they still got a triple jump that day, it just doesn't make any sense.
Nope.
And so, generally speaking, if a kid is both, I still have them at about the same mark, if that answers that question. And then last but not least, this is something I just wanted to share. Starting foot is determined by athlete. So actually, I'm going to go to that picture that I shared last week of the crouch start. I allow my athletes to choose what foot is forward in both the long and the triple jump. And Casey, I'm not sure I did this when you were there, or at least when you first started figuring out which foot would be forward. I think we just kind of went and stuck with it.
I think, yeah, my left leg was dominant, and that's how I came out of the blocks up until then. So that's what felt natural starting an approach. I didn't really do anything special to decide. I kind of just went with it.
Perfect. I think a lot of coaches out there, they always want their athletes strongest, if you'll say that, maybe even their jump foot forward. But in many cases, that's not the most comfortable for the athletes. Athletes have different needs and different, desires in terms of like comfort out of that start. And so I really push that athletes get to choose which foot is forward in their approach, just so that I know full-heartedly that they're coming out of that start feeling very comfortable. And so that's something that I'm very big on. And I know we kind of answered some questions for the chat, but does anybody have any other questions about things that we covered, like anything that you see on the screen here about the percentage idea, having the same mark for both, anything like that, anything popping up in your minds at all?
Coach Ewing, I like the idea of the controlled percentage for triple jump approach. I'm just wondering that in a course of a 4-year, 3 months per year, and you have 70 jumpers, how a percentage idea and trying to dial that in, how easy that would be to do.
Yeah, great question, Chris. So I think it's so much more manageable on a team that's smaller, right? If you've only got 15 jumpers, like this could be a really not easy thing to do, but it could be easier. Um, and what I ultimately have to do for a lot of my stuff on my team is stations, right? So if kids are working on approach controllable percentage speed with me, there might be two other groups who are working on some takeoff stuff and maybe even some landing stuff. Because early season, we're really working on those specific things that are going to teach them the most before we go to that first meet and really just kind of like saturate them with knowledge as much as possible. And so I'm lucky that I'm an assistant coach on my track team and I also have assistant coaches. So I'm very fortunate that I'm able to, in many ways, hand off roles and ideas to them that they can coach at other areas, and I'm still able to. Now, one thing that I do as well is during the summer, we have generally unlimited contact anyway through, I think it's July. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll work with kids at that time too. Or if a kid's really, really, really struggling in the approaches and they're motivated enough to really work through it, I go to the track on weekends as well to meet them. And I mean, here in Wisconsin, having that 3 months and that's it, we got to do everything we can within that time period to, you know, spend as much time with them and teach them as much as possible and so on. But I do agree, this percentage idea, not the easiest at a larger, group setting like mine. I'm going to watch next year. The great thing is I normally have a much smaller number of triple jumpers. So this year, our triple jump kids, the group was probably, I don't know, 12 to 15 kids. And I can do that easily because I've learned how to handle the 70 total team jumpers I have. So that number has having smaller numbers of triplers has helped.
So my thoughts on it. Listen, I mean, certainly practice and try whatever you want to try. I just think, like, even if you were be able to replicate it really well at practice, I think that you're going to have trouble at meets when either their arousal levels changes or that you're not going to have a free lap to be able to time them at the meet.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, even if you're off by, like, let's say like a tenth of a second, like that's a lot when your approach is only 20 meters. And so, like, I just think the board is going to be really inconsistent. And that's why I think just having them go from a shorter approach is just easier. Like, I definitely understand that there are some challenges around kids getting freaked out about stuff that doesn't matter, but if they can't have two different marks and put it in their phone, then I don't know if they're really ready to be jumpers.
Aaron, thank you. That made me laugh. No, but yeah, I do agree. Like, I do think that maybe sometimes I think too deeply about some of this stuff, and that's why I like these conversations. Because uh, it's going to help me keep myself in check or question whether something is, doable or even reasonable or something I should have in a season's worth of time. I guess for me, the only reason I'm pushing it is because we get so little time with them that I want to make sure we maximize. And maybe this is a good idea that would do that, and maybe it's not. But honestly, Aaron, if next year I try this and it seems like boards are inconsistent and takeoffs are weird and they don't seem like they're, hitting that percentage or speed or whatever it might be, or like you mentioned, arousal levels, excitement levels might be a little different. It's something that I'll probably end up just, thrown to the wayside. One thing that I do want to do next year, and this is one of the first times I've thought about doing this actually as well, and I didn't get to do it this year again, is an arousal checkpoint or communication. So just before an athlete goes, they're able to communicate to me if they're, 1, 2, 3, or 5 in terms of like energy level. So we can also factor that into training and knowing how they're going to react in certain situations as well. But yes, I totally agree. Your points are right on the money. Anybody else want to share anything?
But I don't know. Don't you think that a shorter approach is warranted if a child doesn't have a ton of speed. I mean, I utilize a shorter approach for my kids who aren't very fast. I use longer approaches for my top end sprinters. My kids who are my open sprinters, like Nicole, like Chris Brunswick, who made the state finals in the 100 and the 200, they were all state. My kids who are my F troop kids, I don't want to embarrass them, so I utilize a short approach so that they can see some success in the jump.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what they were asking earlier, Patrice, about, does a shorter approach kind of do the same thing to control an athlete's speed down the triple jump? And I think we have kind of come to a consensus that it does. It does help for them to have a shorter approach. And to that point as well, on our team, certain age levels and experience levels, I should say, I also change how many steps I give them. Generally, our older kids are the fastest, generally, not always. And so they generally get a little bit more steps in their approach than others. The freshmen coming in generally don't have as much of an approach because they're younger, inexperienced, and don't know how to control that runway yet. But no, I would completely agree. A shorter approach can definitely be that for individuals that have lesser speed at that point in time.
I feel like we should be determining the number of steps in somebody or the length of somebody's approach, not so much based on what their top speed is, so much as when they reach their top speed. I've seen a broad spectrum of people in triple jump especially and in long jump who do, they're also winning meets in the 100 and the 60, and I've seen some people who are, they're mile runners and they're doing triple jump on the side. And I think that it's important. I think that's an important distinction, because when you are reaching, I feel like when you reach top speed is when you should be hitting the board at the same time. Mm-hmm. Everybody has different top speeds, and everybody also reaches those speeds at different times. So regardless of how fast they are, I think that when they hit whatever speed they're going to hit, I think they should also be hitting the board.
Does coaches, do any of you ask your athletes, hey, did you feel like you were at top speed, or do you feel like you were at top controllable speed when you took off? Do you guys have those conversations with your athletes?
My athletes, especially my rookies, feel like they're not up to top speed yet when we first begin, but part of that's in my design in terms of making sure that they start doing the technique better first before we add more speed to it. So I try to keep the rookies at a shorter approach so they're not quite as fast.
Perfect. I think we're very much the same on that, Coach Mertens. Anybody else want to share anything?
One thing that didn't really come up, I think like people should definitely, if you're gonna do long and triple, you should take off different feet. I'm not talking about like when you start. I'm just talking about the board. Like okay. I think, like maybe this is something that Casey could try or something. It's like I think it's extremely difficult for anybody, high school, whatever level you want, to do long and triple jump really well off the same leg. Like the takeoff is so different that I think from a neurological standpoint, it's just hard to have both of those skills dialed in at that speed. And I just like people that are really good, long jumpers that are like pretty good triple jumps just because they're really athletic. Like they do like a weird penultimate at the takeoff. Mm-hmm. Because they're hell of an athletes, they still can jump far. But like that's not optimal, and you wouldn't want them to do that if they were trying to optimize their triple jump. And so like to be clear, like on another like tangent or aside, like I do think you can do a little bit of a penultimate if you want, like if you're really powerful and you're strong and you can handle that. And maybe speed is not like your forte. Like it's okay to be like a hop dominated jumper, but like in high school, that's just extremely rare that kids have excellent technique and they're like, I think it's better for me to be hop dominated, so that's what I'm going to do. Like I don't know if I've like ever seen that before.
Yeah, Aaron, I can only think of one kid, honest to God, that stood out to me that was the hop dominant and who could actually hold it and had that strength like you're talking about. And he was going to be a senior this year from Beloit here in Wisconsin. I don't remember his name, but he made finals last year in the triple jump at state here. And he had one of the most amazing first phases, but I always questioned how in the world he was able to sustain anything because he came from such great heights down to the ground on that, hop landing that it was almost hard to watch. So it's definitely rare.
Yeah, and I think that the sacrifice is going to come with your speed. If you're going to do a penultimate, you're going to lose some speed coming to the board. I mean, that's even true to a degree with long jump, but like obviously you need to convert some of that energy to vertical. Long jump aerial in the air, you're going to have more vertical velocity at takeoff than you would for a hop. So you have to have a penultimate.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know we're coming up close to an hour now at this point for the video and our talk. Does anybody want to just quickly touch upon, if there's another question, we can definitely go with that. But the idea of using a different jump foot for long versus triple, I mean, this is something we can definitely, discuss in much further detail in a different, time together. But Casey, I see you're unmuted. Do you want to share anything in that?
Yeah, that's what I started doing this year. My current coach has been having me. She wants most of the group to be, versed in multiple jumps. If your main jump is high jump, she still wants you to do long jump. If you're a triple jumper, she still wants you to do long. Maybe hang out at some of the high jump practices, and she coaches them very similarly. And she has, after a couple months or a season or two of her trying to get me back into long jump, it wasn't working off of my left foot because I jump off of my left in triple, and so I can't do the penultimate. I can't get that height in long jump after my muscle memory messing that up for triple. So she did have me switch to doing a right-footed long jump because that's similar to the third phase, I guess. And in triple, once you've lost that speed by your third phase and you're really trying to get into the pit, you should be trying to jump up. So I think that the third phase of triple mimics long jump pretty well, and I've done it a little bit. I don't have a whole lot of meets under my belt for long jump yet, but I do understand it, and I think it does make a difference. I've been able to jump a little bit farther off my right foot. My teammates would always joke around because a couple of my teammates did the same thing, where they went from long to triple or triple to long, and we make jokes about your left foot PR versus your right foot PR. And it's a difficult transition, I think, after having done nothing but triple jump for a few years, but it's doable, and I think it is a good idea.
Interesting.
Casey, have you ever tried high jump?
Oh man, yes. I was a high jumper back in 8th grade, and I did high jump my freshman year of college because I was recruited as a multi, doing the pentathlon and heptathlon, and I think my PR last year was like 4.8, and not great, but I have done it recently, and don't know how much potential I've got in it, but yes, I have done it.
Well, I'm telling you, triple jump, high jump is actually not a bad combo.
Yeah, I might have to look into that as long as my coach is having us be multi-event athletes like that. Yeah.
Because it's a little better than triple long.
I think so. Yeah. I haven't practiced it much. I haven't really done it enough to feel the differences, but I do think, yeah, I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I try to do a deep six to that one. I try to make that shift real quick.
Sounds good. I'll look into that.
Woohoo! Might be easier on your legs.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Taking out a landing on the long jump as well
Yes.
might, help your legs a little bit for sure. Great conversation, guys. To be fully honest, I have always kind of taken just my athletes' words of comfort in terms of what they think they can do in terms of taking off different feet for long and triple or the same foot for long and triple. I talk with my athletes a lot, just saying like, how did that feel? I've started working in a lot more bounding over the last couple of years, just to kind of watch to see what they can do off each foot as well in terms of observation. I guess I've never really like openly said, hey, if you're going to be a left long, you're a right triple. And I think, again, that's because I don't have a whole lot to double in both events. But the idea of, those takeoffs being so different and, all the things you guys said completely make sense. So, whether it's right to just openly tell a kid they're going to be opposite feet or, you make some kind of procedure of really testing to see what they look like or observation or communication. I think it's a great idea to keep that in mind that they could potentially be different feet. Because I think a lot of coaches maybe just think, oh, they're just left foot dominant or left foot strong. That means they should do both. So the idea, bringing this up, Aaron, like you did, and putting that out there like that, I think that's great because it'll maybe help some people to look at their jumpers a little bit differently instead of just assuming. So it's great. Anybody else have anything they want to throw in before we finish up tonight's conversation?
We had one kid, in my experience, who was able to long and triple, and do it well. His name was Alvin Campbell. And he was the bomb. Oh well.
But
I
it's
think
pretty rare.
Yeah, he was a 52-foot triple jumper. He won state, and he got second in the long jump.
Wow.
At 24 feet. And he was a hurdler.
Whew.
But he was a kung fu guy.
He trained in kung fu.
Yes.
I've never had an athlete that came from a martial arts background, like a significant one anyway. I'm always looking for connections between different sports and building jumpers. Like I just recently had a kid that plays hockey jump very, very, very well. And so I started thinking about the stability of ankles from a hockey standpoint, but I've never thought of like kung fu or karate. That's interesting.
Well, that's why I study other sports to see what I can do, with other sports, and see what we can do.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Patrice. Appreciate that.
No problem.
All
I
right.
realize I
Oh, go
realize
ahead.
this I realize this question is not exactly pertain to the focus of this topic, but listening to Casey and even thinking about my jumpers, middle school we have a long jump. They don't have triple. We get into high school, everybody thinks they're a long jumper, and they develop some interest in triple jump, or I see something in triple jump. How long do when do you decide who becomes a long jumper, who becomes a triple jumper? Because if you have 3 months times 4 years with them at high school level, is there a way to more quickly figure out what type of jumper they are, long or triple, and then begin to focus that approach for them more quickly?
Oh, great question, Chris. And I open the floor to anyone that wants to answer this. So, same setup in Sun Prairie. I think there are some middle schools that have triple in their programs. They just don't compete in it. They start teaching early. We don't have this in our city, just like you don't. Ultimately, what happens is kids come in, and long jump is a high interest event that everyone thinks they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately what you just do is you just kind of watch the kids, right? And one of the biggest distinctions that I look for, generally speaking, is I look, and this isn't this isn't just because of the norms that people look for, but I look for long levers, long legs, long arms, a moderate amount of speed. Like if a kid's struggling to go down that runway at a fairly fast speed, they may be more made to be a triple jumper. Like who knows? The weird thing about this is I've seen tall kids go out and triple jump and do well. I've seen tall kids go out and triple jump and do terrible. I've seen tiny little scrawny kids that shouldn't be able to triple jump to save their lives go out and win a meet by 3 feet. I've seen like a kid that looks like a bodybuilder go out and win a meet, even though you think his weight could be a big compromise because of all the muscle mass he has, right? So ultimately, what I do is I just say, listen, kids, I think that and you should try triple. Anyone else that wants to, I'll take everyone and anyone that wants to. And then I just watch them as I introduce them to the phases. And if I notice a kid straight up is not meant for triple jump in those drills, then I'll say, I think we're just going to stick to long for safety reasons. Now, what you could also do in your general training then as well is to simply throw things in there in your long jump stuff like single leg bounding, where you can watch just how well your kids are going to react. And if they have really good body control and it seems like their hips aren't buckling the second they hit the ground and they're keeping speed through things, and although it's not necessarily a triple jump practice, like you might want to walk up to that kid and say, hey, like you might want to be a triple jumper. So there's just crossover that you have to kind of watch for. Does that help?
Yes, I mean, generally speaking, I've kind of looked for how much pop that they have off the board of long jump.
Mm-hmm.
That if they can get a lot of height, in my mind, that they can do long jump. If they struggle to get height, then in my mind, triple jump might be more appropriate.
And I think that's very valid. It, you just it's so hard sometimes with how little time we have in the state and our middle school programs not having triple jump to pick and choose and find those kids. And I think the way you do it is good. And I open it up to as many people that want to try it as possible, and then I just kind of watch and see what happens and try to throw drills in when I can that might give me more of an idea. Casey was someone that I knew almost instantly that I wanted to go after for triple jump because of how strong she is. I mean, she's still one of the strongest girls to come through Sun Prairie. And she was doing things in the weight room, even as a freshman, that people were like, holy crap, did you see her in the weight room today? Like, that's just how she was. And, you know, do every triple jump, or does every triple jumper need to have, like, crazy, strength and all this other stuff? I mean, not necessarily, because it's a lot of reaction and bounciness and stuff like that. There's other aspects to it, in my personal opinion. But with Casey, the strength was what really drew me to her. So I look for that as well in athletes. If there's somebody who's doing some great things in the weight room, that speaks to me as potentially a tripler as well. I don't know, again, if that helps, but that's just something that kind of came to mind.
It helps a lot. Thank you.
Perfect. And Chris, I would love to go over more of this once we get to some other topics. Like right now, we're just going through all the stuff that I have planned so far as just approach. But I would love to at some point transition to takeoffs, landings, identifying athletes before they jump, like all those different things, or minimizing injury. Like there's so many different topics I definitely want to touch upon. So hopefully we'll be able to get to those, in the next X amount of weeks, and we'll also have a larger audience, I'm hoping, over time, so we can have even more opinions coming in to help us with that answer.
Yep.
Perfect. So the end of meeting survey here. I'd love for you guys to take that again, if you don't mind, and just add anything that comes to mind. If there's anything that you're kind of still questioning, or an idea that pops up last minute, whatever it might be, you're more than welcome to answer that first question there. If you felt like it was pretty much well covered, then, I mean, everyone that was here last week is here now, so you don't necessarily have to do this because I already have all your email addresses. And we didn't get to this approach style question, so you can just skip that if you decide to go in and answer any of these. And then, of course, I'll have the video for this up, the audio for this up again, like I did last week. And then you can see the results for this if people do fill it out, again, right in this presentation right there. So thank you so much for attending. I love hearing your opinions, your thoughts, your ideas. I hope that, I'm helping you become better, whether you're Casey, an athlete, or, Patrice, a coach, right? And that's what I want to look to get from you as well. I want to do as much growing as I can. So I just appreciate you all being here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. Have a good weekend.